Welcome, everybody, to the February 27th, 2024 Citizens Police Review Board monthly meeting. Welcome on this, semi-rainy now. It's a little bit sunny. I hope everybody got to enjoy the 15 minutes of sun today. So the agenda is, I think we have a quorum. Is Stephanie, anybody call? Excuse me, I think we have everybody, right?
I haven't heard from Mr. Robinson. I don't know if Beth did.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one absent member is Mr. Robinson. Beth, he didn't send an email or anything?
No.
Okay. So at whatever it is, 6:04, we're calling this meeting to order. So how we proceed is we're gonna have I have no opening marks today. However, we're gonna have our report from our executive director. We'll do some case reviews. And for those of you out there in our virtual world, if you would like to make any public comment, either put it in the chat or raise your hand when we're at that section, and you have about 3 minutes to speak to us. Alrighty, without further ado, I don't believe we have to, first of all, we have to approve the minutes. So everybody had a chance, you probably got them middle of last week. Everybody have an opportunity to read their minutes? If so, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the meeting minutes as presented? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Alrighty, Beth, your executive report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see all of you. And we're very close to spring. That groundhog might have been telling the truth this year.
We'll take it.
Intake, yeah, we'll take it. Intake this year so far are 30 complaints. There's been a lot of talk, reporting, discussion, debate, fear, joy, you name it. But the chief of police, Garado, implemented the changes he's talked about over the last several months. On Monday, yesterday, the changes were effective. These are, as described by the chief, data-driven decisions related to deployment of officers and the model that they're using now. The officers have been moved to 4 10-hour days a week with 3 consecutive days off. That's been described as being, a positive for the officers' wellness. This year, it's a little bit skewed because they didn't get their picks or assignments, and it was a little bit of a slow start for the year. But at any rate, the 4 10-hour days is now in effect. The overnight coverage in the city has been reduced to having 20 to 27, 29 officers available to patrol the entire city overnight. I don't know exactly how many supervisors are going to be involved in that, but they'll be staged in different locations in the city. And if something comes up that they have to respond to, strategically, they believe that they have them readily available to respond with up to, I think, it could go up to 63 officers altogether if they had to pull in backup from the specialized units, from K9 and that sort of thing. There will be a new night watch commander who, in theory, will be responsible for the whole overnight shift. And people have expressed concern about that. The station houses will be closed from 3 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the morning. They installed call boxes outside of the station houses that directly connect to 911. If someone's having an emergency and they're near the zone building, then they can hit the button between 3 and 7 a.m. and somebody will respond to their call, but there will be nobody sitting in the station to answer or be of any assistance to anybody coming there. That's significant and has caused it's caused some controversy about people being fearful about, well, what do you mean we aren't going to have a police officer in our zone? It is what it is. We'll see how that works out. His street crime unit is an interesting, we've talked about that. And when the chief was with us on a couple of occasions, he described it as not being the same as a street response unit of the days of gone by, where we've had trouble with them, jump out squads and that sort of thing, but rather a street crime unit that is going to be responding to areas where and focused on people most likely to be causing the gun violence in the city. I'm not sure how that fits with decisions that were made several years ago to avoid hotspot policing because of the bias attached to that. But that's what the model is now. Telephone reporting unit is to be enhanced and available from 7 a.m. to 3 a.m. every day. And that's to allow people to call in their own reports. Police will not be responding to incidents that are not in progress. I'm not sure how that's going to get sorted out. Dispatch, I don't know how they've been prepared for this, but we know that triage is going to have to happen at the dispatch level. I guess that's the plan, that people will be able to use a telephone reporting unit rather than having a police officer respond and take a written report at their location. The issue about responding only to incidents in progress has raised concern also. I mean, that the foundation of public trust with their police officers is if you need help, you call and a police officer comes to help you. That's not going to be the case anymore. So that's caused some concern, some fear. You can think of many scenarios where there may not be an aggressive, home invasion or some fight going on that you need a cop there right away, but you may be a victim of domestic violence. There's been a PFA violation. You're fearful. What do you do? Well, you can call a telephone reporting unit and you can file your complaint that way. I don't know. That's probably the most fragile of issues that in this whole new model that is creating controversy and fear among people that I've talked to. But time will tell. They've also enhanced their online reporting for people to just get online and file their report. It's like do-it-yourself policing. I don't know how I don't know the logistics. I don't know the mechanics of how these things are going to be sorted out, how they're going to determine truthful reports and false reports, things that can become very cumbersome, at least administratively. I can't tell you about that yet because I don't know. The violent crime unit is combined now with homicide, narcotics, intelligence, and the violence prevention unit. So they've all combined now. So the violent crime unit has a lot of expertise within it. And again, with a high priority placed on violent crime and intervention and hopefully resolution, solving some of these problems, some of the chronic problems, but also individual cases will be attended to in a very prompt way. And I think over in Zone 1, I don't know, Zone 1 cares, I think, is what they're Pittsburgh Police Cares. Zone 1 Cares is what they're modeling a citywide Pittsburgh Police Cares site online. And that's to foster a healthier and more dynamic relationship with the community and the police. If you have a chance, if you look up Zone 1 Cares, it's a nice site. and it's friendly, and it encourages people to be, to understand better that police are helpers in the community, and it develops a rapport, as much as you can develop a rapport over online. But those are the basics of this new police model that's out there. And the fact that it was, there are a lot of things you can describe it as, but the chief's rationalizations, basically data-driven decisions. If, for example, the overnight, and he's used this publicly, if 8% of their calls come in during that time period, why would we have 20 or 30% of our officers deployed during that time? Data-driven decision-making it's one part of the decision-making. There's a whole other part, just like we see with our cases, there's another part to the story. There's more to it than just what the numbers tell you. So if we're going to, implement this based on data, then I need to find out and report back to you what the period of time is going to be during which baseline data is established, and they can then analyze using the same methodology that they did to make the decision to evaluate the decisions. So that has to be, it's longitudinal. It takes time. So I don't know how long he's planning to do that. I sincerely doubt that it's going to be a full year, although one of the goals is to reduce the number of calls from 150, 200, 300,000 down to 50,000 calls a year. Problem with that is the police are not initiating the calls. Those are people. Those are people calling 911 and asking for some kind of help. So how that translates into an efficient and effective use of enforcement power, in contrast to the caretaking role that police have, that's going to take a while to determine. And I don't have a time frame during which they're going to assess whether this is working or not working. But I think it certainly merits close vigilance, and we'll see. We'll see if we hear from folks. We did post it on our Facebook page, I think it was, if anybody had any thoughts or concerns. So, let us know. And as time goes on, we'll be able to, Miss Bridget, as our community liaison, will have ears to the ground, and she'll be able to tell what kind of response community is having to this. One of the things that I've been asked is, there's a part of the community that is relieved that there will be fewer police officers on the street. There's a whole bigger part of the community that is fearful that there will be fewer police officers on the street, at least visible officers. So that balancing, and as we go into budget season in the city of Pittsburgh, what's the projection for next year, the year after, and so on? Remember, there was a significant reduction in the number of personnel allocated this year for the police. A class is supposed to come in, maybe two, from 917 to 740 officers is a big gap. 40 or 80 officers isn't going to close that gap. And it's certainly not going to, it's not going to restore to what the force was, the number of personnel in the Bureau of Police was prior to this year. And there's, I think, 196 officers still eligible to retire. So it's a very tenuous situation, but I don't have any reason, and I don't want anybody to think that we don't think that they can keep us safe. We're going into this as a bit of an experiment, but ultimately, if it works and people are safe, fine. If it doesn't work and people are not safe, or they're not feeling safe, then I don't think that there would be a hesitation on the chief's part to revert to some other model, or to amend and revise the deployment schedules. So that's all I know about the overhaul of police operations. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it or discuss it, answer what I can.
stations that will be open during this evening and night, do they determine what stations they would be?
No, they're not assigned to stations. The overnight is one cadre of police officers for the entire city. They're going to be staged in different parts of the city, but available to respond anywhere in the city.
So they're
It's just
sitting in
one-
their cars in these
I don't
areas?
know. I don't know. And you just reminded me, another part of this plan is that they're not going to respond to parking complaints, which their data shows it is a big bulk of their calls that they're going out on. They are hoping to turn that over to the parking authority.
So if an emergency fire truck or an EMT can't get down the road, they gotta wait for somebody from the parking authority to get there. Is that sort of what I'm hearing?
I'm hopeful that that's not the case. I'm hoping that they would consider that an emergency in progress, that they'd have to get that vehicle moved. But I don't know that. I don't know that for sure, Dr. Gershio. I don't know. Again, this is only the second day of this model being in operation. So there are I'm sure a lot of operational glitches. I don't know. I think they're talking in terms of routine parking complaints, but what's routine, it could be really critical for an individual who's calling for help. So again, I'm sure that the chief would be willing to come back and speak to us, in a month or two about the rollout and how it's going. And I'll be happy to update you as I learn more about it, or if we receive complaints that may be the result of it, the change in the operations. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's a huge overhaul, and it can only be assessed over a period of time, and hopefully nobody's going to be caught up in it in a negative way.
Do we know the data that was used going from responding to 200,000 calls per year to 50,000? That's 75%. Is that what I take from that is 75% of the calls are frivolous or non-emergency. Is that truly the case? I'm interested to see what data was used to create this new program.
I'll be happy to obtain something that would explain that. If I can get a copy of what they used, I'll be happy to try. Mr. Kotler, be happy to. I know that there's data available in the Western Pennsylvania data repository. I'll see what we can obtain from them.
It's a concern trying to head towards a predetermined metric when it concerns public safety.
Yeah. I think it illustrates too a certain degree of creativity when you're trying to manage with a couple hundred fewer officers, that there's nothing you can do about it. That's all you have. So how do you manage that? I am surprised about the 4 10-hour day, because that's taking time away that you could be covering the street. You're essentially losing a day an officer that way a week. So I was really surprised that was a core part of it. The rationale behind that is officer wellness. To give them 3 days off a week. Officers that I've talked to, they're grumbling because they're tired already. They're worried about the overtime. They're worried about how they're going to cover major events in the city. The 10 hours is grueling. That they're not so sure they really want that, but that's what they have now, because at one time they did want it. So now they have it. Careful what you pray for, and we'll see how it rolls out. I think we're going to have to watch also to some extent if there's an increase in secondary details and how the number of hours worked a week is affected with secondary details. They're only allowed to work so many extra hours on top of their 40. And that depends on how long they've been on the job. There's a whole formula to it. But now they're going to have an extra day. So that could lead to even more work to fatigue them. I mean, you don't want tired cops out there, not only for their own good, but also for the rest of us. We don't want tired cops. So the officer wellness angle on this, that'll take time to evaluate as well. But I'll try to get the data that they use to create this model. It was a creative way to deal with the issue. You're going to have fewer officers. We have reduced the number of officers. We've reduced what we're spending on policing in the city. So now figure out how you're going to keep the city safe. And this is a way that it might work. It might. We'll see. And, along with that comes what kind of other support services are available to the officers and to the citizens of the city who might need some other kind of assistance. And that takes us right to the Office of Community Health and Safety. You will recall the co-response talk, a discussion about having co-responders, social workers, or a cohort of professionals who can respond to people in crisis where an enforcement action is not required, but some kind of assistance and support is needed by the individual. Even to as a diversion to having a police officer show up, that a crisis call could be triaged at dispatch, and the appropriate human service professional could be sent to assist and help the individual, whatever their crisis is, if they need to be hospitalized or whatever they might need. But it doesn't involve using the city asset of enforcement power, which the police have, and they're the only ones that have it, that we can divert some of their attention by using appropriately trained professionals to intervene. The Office of Community Health and Safety is supposed to be doing that whole concept. It's not a new concept. It's been around in policing for 30 years, but they're still getting it off the ground here in the city. They have grants. They've received grants that are supposed to go toward enhancing their crisis intervention team training, their availability of social workers to assist police in training and in responding. The resources have been put there. We would like to have more information about their co-response model. We've heard of where they have a trauma team that goes out after a violent incident and in support of victims or survivors. And from what we hear, people are pleased with that. But that first part of it should, it just doesn't seem to be rolling. And we'd like to see it be a little bit more aggressive and a little more effective and perhaps a little more stable in terms of its availability, not just to the community, but to the officers, because they're supposed to be CIT certified. They're supposed to know how to intervene in a crisis. There's still a limitation to that because of the nature of their role and so on. If you have a substance abuse problem, you don't want a cop coming in your face and then telling you everything's going to be okay. You're going to do a lot better and probably have more success if a qualified specialist comes, has the discussion with you, assists you in locating resources to support you, and get you on your merry way. The case over on the West End Bridge is an example that I think would have perhaps benefited if the officers had access to a civilian backup, if you will, that could de-escalate the individual's anxiety about police, and perhaps have accomplished getting a ride for that individual to get her off of the bridge, that it wouldn't necessarily have ended up the way it did. But that doesn't, we don't know. We'll never know. But this resource was not available to them. And that's, that's something that I think we would be looking for, that support would be in place. And we have countless cases that we've dealt with here, where the response of the law enforcement officer was totally contrary to what the circumstance required, but had a professionally trained responder come in, we might have had a different outcome. So we're looking to that office. We did put an invitation out. Mr. Elwood, I don't know if you heard back yet, but he's been trying to connect with the office to come and we could have a briefing with them in the office to understand precisely what their goals and objectives are, what's to be expected of the CIT training that they're supposed to be doing, certifications, and what is the co-response model that they're trying to put out there. There's a lot of focus on homeless situations and individuals who are homeless and in crisis. There's a huge amount of attention directed there and a lot of money directed there. The $10 million grant to AHN with the Reach Out on the Streets program. The housing and support that City Council's contemplating now. There's a lot of focus on that part of our community. There's also a whole other part of our community that needs a different kind of response. And that's what we're looking toward this office. If it wasn't the Office of Community Health and Safety, we'd be knocking on the Allegheny County's mental health system, behavioral health system, and substance abuse system, for how are you helping us in the city of Pittsburgh take care of these human issues that people need help. They don't need to go to jail. They need support and they need help. And that's why we have social workers who are dedicated beyond, reasonable expectation to assist people, so that we're not dealing with a problem that doesn't require enforcement, but that does require some professional intervention. And if the cops are the ones that are called to the scene, they should have the benefit of knowing that there's civilian backup, professional backup available to them as well as the individual. And that kind of brings me back to one of the executive directory inquiries that's open is the West End Bridge and the status of that response team for calls where they may be critically important to intervene and de-escalate a circumstance that a cop just can't do, either because of their own skill and competence or because of the individual's resistance to them. So I only have a couple more things to mention here. Oh yeah, just to follow up with the grant, one of the grants that the city received was to be spread over a 3-year period. And part of what was to be funded by that grant was a social worker, CIT support service, and a data analyst to assist in assessing what the needs are, a needs assessment for crisis intervention support to law enforcement. That came out of the Bureau of Justice Administration, and that's, where are the mobile teams? I don't think Resolve used to have a mobile team that the police could call to come in and help, and they don't seem to be utilized anymore. So this grant is supposed to be helping the city develop its own in-house system. And we'll see. But it affects many of our cases. So it is a priority for us in the office anyway. Okay, the ED inquiries that remain open. And Dr. Gershu, I think if I just finish these and instead of pushing them down, it will avoid cluttering up the case reviews. There was back in December an incident involving a police sergeant who was captured on video actually, of pushing and shoving a 15-year-old young man who was in Zone 3 station waiting, processing, I guess. And whatever transpired, the sergeant came out and gave him a shove. You've probably all seen that video. We have opened an inquiry immediately to better understand what the facts and circumstances were involved in that case, whether or not what we could see comported with the Bureau's policies, juvenile policies, which does speak to how a juvenile is to be secured when they're being detained, and so on and so forth. That remains open. We're still gathering some information about that, but publicly, I believe it's been released that the officer was initially disciplined. He was put on leave, and then he was disciplined with 5 days pending dismissal, but that was then reduced to a temporary demotion and a suspension of a couple of days. The temporary demotion, I'm not quite sure I understand that. That's one of the things we're trying to get more information about. If you look at the FOP's contract with the city now, and one of the highlights of it was the adoption of a disciplinary matrix. And that matrix has categorized standards of conduct and policies into like a grading system, A, B, C, and D. And if you have an A violation, then you're probably going to get a verbal or whatever. If you have a D violation, you're probably out the door. So there's a progressive scheme to it. But I have not found temporary demotion. I found demotion, but I haven't found temporary. So I don't understand how that works. And that's one of the things we want to find out and report back to you, because it's an unusual thing to hear. And it's an unusual action. I don't think any of us have ever heard of that before. But we do have that.
Is it desk duty or?
The case is still open. Yes. Was somebody asking me something?
Yeah, Beth,
No.
is it a temporary demotion? Is
the
that
video
like?
was publicly released on WPXI early in February, if you want to look that up, if you haven't seen it. Let's see, there was another shooting up here in the end of January. I say up here, it was up in the Mount Washington area. Southside Slopes, actually. And that involved an officer involved shooting a man named Austin Cousins. Around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning on January 24th, there was a call to Huron Street on Southside Slopes. Police encountered a man in the street who was near his vehicle, and the trunk was open. The man declared to the officer that there were guns in his car, in the trunk of the car. He quickly went around and reached into the trunk, and the officer discharged his weapon, and Mr. Cousins was killed. He was shot. And after that, the police did obtain a search warrant, and they did recover 2 rifles in the trunk of that vehicle, 11 firearms, and bullet holes in his residence. Allegheny County police are investigating that incident, as is protocol, because it was a city officer. It bumps over to Allegheny County for investigative purposes, and they will in turn turn it over to the district attorney's office for determination whether it was justified use of force or not. We had some questions around the movement that this guy had in terms of the reaching to the vehicle. Did the officer actually see a firearm? We don't know. But those questions remain, and so the case is open. And the last major case that we have open as an executive inquiry is the case of Mr. Jim Rogers. That case is pretty much settled, except that we don't have a formal declaration from the district attorney with regard to a prosecutorial decision, which limits what we are able to do in terms of an investigation. And I reported last month that what we do is we look around the case. We look at what we can see, and are there actions that would seem to violate policy, that would be contrary to best practices or established city policies, Is there something in the response of EMS? Is there something else in this picture that we can address without focusing on the individual actions of the officers that were involved in that encounter? And that's because the law precludes us from doing that. So I have asked that our staff prepare a report, or at least outline it, and I'll do it in similar to what we did for Kopi's bar incident. And that's essentially a white paper on the incident itself, what was observed. You'll recall that we did open an inquiry into supervisory training in the Bureau of Police last year. And in the summer, last summer, Chief Scarrato, he acknowledged that that training has to be revamped. And so we, there's nothing we can do about that, except, yeah, you got to revamp it, and we'll revisit this in a year. And many of the issues that we saw and we observed in that case, in Mr. Rogers' incident, track back to the supervision that was on scene during that encounter. I did circulate the motion to enforce the settlement in that case. That was distributed to you. And the reason for that was it contained a lot of other information that could give better context to how the settlement even came about. What were some of the specifics that were agreed to, and some of the details that weren't otherwise publicly, expounded on. If there's anything in there that raises any question or concern on your part, just let me know and we can follow up on it. There's still a matter of the status of Officer Edmonds, who was the initial responding officer to that incident. He's the one that was engaged with Mr. Rogers. Three other officers, there were 4 of them that were initially terminated. The other 3, with the exception of Mr. Edmonds, the other 3 have been returned to their job through arbitration. The city in the agreement says they will not admit any liability for Mr. Rogers' death, yet city solicitor comes out and says that our officers were responsible for Mr. Rogers' death. So there's little things in there that just make you kind of, gives rise to some questions that you want to dig a little bit deeper. Doesn't mean that anything's going to change. Nobody's suggesting that, but being fully informed certainly makes for a better prospective look at things. And the union, the attorney representing the estate of Mr. Rogers and the survivor claim from Mr. Rogers' believed to be daughter, he held a public viewing of additional body-worn camera video on, I think it was like January 31st, or it was the end of January. And it was a public showing of these videos at over in Homewood. We were at CEA, Community Empowerment Association's building. And there was a good turnout from folks that were interested and curious about the rest of the story. And it was it was helpful, but not terribly. There was nothing like amazing revealed in the course of watching those videos. It was more of a reinforcement of some of the things that we had observed. But the union subsequently filed a grievance against city for permitting some of the evidence, the videos, officer statements, and information being released during that public showing. I believe the schedule was to show it on Thursday, and I think it was Monday of that week that Mr. Hollis publicly released the information. I don't know why. He did it earlier than intended, but right afterwards, there was a grievance filed by the union. So there are other things around that incident, that case, that are interesting from a policy perspective and a problem-solving perspective and fiduciary perspective, but they're not things that are typically things that we would be investigating. So if we do a report, a white paper type of a report, we can include those things just for posterity's sake and for further illumination of how broad in scope this particular case became. I received today from Mr. Davis a letter of recusal, and I want to put that on the record, that Mr. Dalen Davis, member Davis, has recused himself from any deliberations due to his public expressions in the course of the evolution of the Mr. Rogers case. So we've taken that to note, Mr. Davis, and we've put that on the record. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No. I just wanted to go back, if I could, for a moment, to the juvenile that was detained at the Zone 3 station. If I can ask a question.
I'm
in
sorry,
relation to that.
Now I can hear you. Could you repeat that, please? I didn't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Then no, I have no comments as far as my recusal for the Jim Rogers deliberations. I just wanted to go back, if I could ask a question in regards to the juvenile that was detained at Zone 3 in regards to that officer. As of right now, all disciplinary measures against that officer, at least through the bureau, has been exhausted, but there is no actions being taken by the DA as far as the actions to that officer, or if there is any action being taken.
Not that anyone has been made aware of publicly.
Okay, thank you.
Keep in mind that that would be a child line kind of an issue too. It wouldn't be a straightforward investigation of a regular assault, because of the subject in that incident was a juvenile. So you want to know if somebody did call child line and report that as child abuse. You know, it gets complicated. And I don't know what the district attorney's office is doing with it. And I don't know that because of his status, and we don't even know why he was in custody, actually. Oh, yes, I think we might. I'm not going to say it. Never mind. I say it because I don't want to misspeak. But he's a juvenile, so that record is protected.
Right. No, I guess I was more concerned of the behavior while a juvenile was in detention, regardless of what he was there for originally. I think this became a separate issue just because of the actions that we clearly can see on the video that raises the question of what is a fair enough disciplinary measure against an officer that we entrust with the safety and care of our children, regardless of whatever the offense that they may have had to become interacting with the City of Pittsburgh Police Department. And then also,
I'm not blaming the victim. I'm not blaming the victim at all. I'm just making the comment that the record itself is protected.
right.
Yeah. Any other questions that I can answer?
Beth, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, good. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. All right, so under unfinished business, we have consideration of scheduling some in-person meetings. At our last board meeting, we had a discussion about whether we wanted to continue on Zoom or to have some in person, and if we had them in person, would we, use, when we were in person pre-pandemic, it was typically one at Chambers downtown, and then when we could, one would be out in the community, and then back to the chamber and then out in the community. I do believe though, we probably had maybe 60% or 70% in council chambers and the other 40% out in the community. So at last meeting, we asked you to think about it. Has there been any discussion, thought that you want to bring up here? Any suggestions for us to discuss?
Like a question, whenever we would previously have meetings outside of council chambers, how well attended were they by the public?
Depended on the community. You know, when we were in chamber, I gotta say that made, again, unless there was some very hot subject matter, we might have 4 or 5. That included the camera person and our friends that come on each week here. And again, it's same in the community, depending if it was a community where there was a hot issue, we would have, 10, 12, 14 people. But I also want to bring up that we've had our most quorum, ability to have quorum, when we went video. There were times when we would show at chamber or in a community where we weren't able to do any legal business because we didn't have quorum. So I want people to see both sides of this. That yes, we're out in the community and, we do have people that will come depending on the neighborhood and the subject area. Beth has been at this longer than me, so perhaps Beth, you can elaborate or.
Thank
say
you, Dr.
something to the
Gershow. I
message.
think it does ebb and flow. Depends on if there's something that's particularly controversial going on. We tend to have a few more people come, but ordinarily it will just be the board. And you are quite correct that forming the quorum has on occasion been difficult when we were out in the community because people couldn't get there. It could be weather, it could be illness, where they could jump on a remote call, but they couldn't physically get to the meeting. It is not a draw. We have more people join us on a remote meeting than we've had in public in some time. And that's, before the pandemic. A couple of people might come.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
It sounds
I
to
think
me
that
like. Oh. Go ahead.
I think accessibility is a huge issue, and being remote has made you much more accessible to the public, and with a level of convenience that coming out to a community meeting is just not there for the nature of the work that you do. If you wanted to have a public hearing, I would encourage you to do that, to convene a public hearing in a neighborhood, in a community location. And if it was a particular issue of concern to that particular neighborhood, you would probably draw more people. But physical attendance at our board meetings after the first 10 years have dwindled considerably. But it's been better since you've been remote. Yeah.
Because I remember going down and, everybody getting there by 6 o'clock and us not having a quorum and being able to carry on business. Where I think in my tenure here since the pandemic, I believe it was once, maybe twice in the nearly 4 years that we didn't have a quorum. So I want you to see the side of it going out in the community, that we would have people come if it was a topic to them, in their area, that there was some sort of concern. But I said in the chamber, we had the Ozarks, they would show every week. Um, uh, that's about it. But like I said, I do believe from my perspective, that if we're going to have some sort of public hearing, that we really should be looking at maybe doing that out in the community. Where, we could have the staff look at where those zip codes, where, do some analysis so that we strategically select places where people would want to hear us.
Sounds like the best approach. Sounds like virtually we are far more successful and able to get more work done, that we should probably continue down that path. And I agree, if there are hearings to be held, they should probably be done in the community that's most affected by them.
Anybody, any other input from members?
It's question. If we was to go back to in person, obviously, I know city council chambers has the ability to have a hybrid scenario situation where we could log into Zoom. But is there a cost associated, or is there an opportunity if we was to do something out in the community for I'm just going to say the tech people to set up that same type of hybrid ability in neighborhoods?
From what I know, our tech people do not come out into the community, or at least I've never seen them come out other than some cameras from some of the TV stations.
That's correct, Dr. Gershio, that they don't come out for us.
The city tech people don't.
Yeah.
That's correct.
We have
They do
hired
not.
our own. We've hired our own. You remember Mr. Carpenter? He would come and he would video the meetings, and he also broadcast them for us. But that's all on us. We can do that. There is an expense attached to it, and I don't know that the benefit is such that it gains you anything. But we can certainly. In fact, I don't even, Stephanie, don't we have difficulty even getting to use council's technology?
Well, they have rewired council chambers, and we haven't been in there for a meeting since that rewiring. I mean, we did the state meeting, but it wasn't rewired at that point yet. So I'm not sure how that all works if we were to go back to council chambers. I'm sure I could set up something with David Feiner to figure that all out. But as far as going into the community, yes, as far as going into the community, we'd have to do that on our own.
We do it on our own. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I may add, just my experience moving through from being in person and then going virtually, I don't think that there is any obstruction to us conducting our business doing virtually. I actually think that I might even edge towards being a little more productive. And that's because of preparation. No matter where I'm at, I can settle myself, think about the meeting in preparation for the meeting, and I'm not rushing to get to someplace and feeling hurried or whatever. So there's that. But I will say there's something to be lost, even as the transitions in the board, before and after our meetings when they're in person, you kind of get to bond in a way and know one another. And I think that gets lost in this platform. So I am actually for virtual meetings the majority of the time, but I would put strong emphasis on being strategic for us to get together when purposed. And if that's those public hearings or if there's others, that we take the opportunity for that, because I think it's valuable for the team that's coming on board now. You just get a different perspective of who you're serving alongside when you have those opportunities to interrelate when it's just not virtually. So that's all I'll add.
Yeah, that Sheldon gives very good hugs. So, but again, so it sounds to me, now, we haven't heard from Terry or who else? We heard, I think Terry, do you have anything that you want to add?
Not at this time. They set it all for me. Some
Okay.
meetings are good virtually, and to be impersonable, you should be in person. So you get to know everybody. So
Right,
so
so,
that's all.
so what I'm hearing is that strategically, we should do a couple, public hearings out in our community during this coming year. Again, strategically, hopefully more towards the summer, fall, spring, and not in the middle of winter when we're, when people are less hesitant to come out. I saw a thumbs up from Terry there. So we're in agreement then?
Yep.
Mr. Ward, do we need a motion on that or anything?
Theoretically, since you're doing business, that might lend itself toward the emotion. It's more ministerial in terms of just delegating that to the executive director to establish where the meetings would be held so that proper notice can be given. But, since you do have a quorum, and if you want to have a motion, go right ahead. It was listed on the agenda as consideration of scheduling in-person meetings, so that complies with the Sunshine Act.
So my colleagues want to make a motion,
I'll make a motion.
okay? That's the motion, right? As is, as we discussed, that we would have continue virtually, and then when the need arises, that we go out into the public where it is most needed, and have our meetings then.
Madam Chair, does that include the city council chambers or just in the community?
Good question there. Which everybody's pleasure. So more out in the community, or should we hold, if we hold a public hearing, we should consider one in chambers that is centrally located?
I almost think that the situation may dictate if it's some things maybe more citywide, we would want to have that at city council. If it were more specific to a neighborhood, we may want to consider having it in that area.
So we'll add that part, that if it's a broader issue where we need, public to have access, then we would hold that at chambers. All right. Given that very long motion, does anybody want to second it?
I'll make the second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? Additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Alrighty, I have no new business. Any members, any new business?
All right. Two. Do we have to make a formal motion, or can we just state?
If it's new business right now, we would discuss whether we need to make a motion.
Gotcha.
So it's just discussion at this point.
Gotcha. One is the topic around maybe the creation of a new website for.
So you're saying that the existing website is not adequate?
Correct.
Okay.
Or just to make it user friendly.
Beth, who monitors our website?
Nigel Perry and myself and Stephanie.
Okay.
And it was
So-
just redone and relaunched. Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I guess what Mr. Davis, are you speaking of, when you say user friendly, are you speaking specifically about certain areas of the website? Can you be more specific? Are you talking about the general website?
Well, I know when you go on to it, like sometimes there's areas, like when you click on it, it repeats itself. Or like even like if I wanted to go in chronological order to previous meetings, in the past, sometimes like the dates are out of order. When I've clicked on a link on some of them, but they'll be in order in other areas. So again, just like trying to make it user friendly, as far as accessing that historical data, in context. Minor changes,
Are you-
I would say, nothing major changes. But
Well,
again, I'm sorry.
I just, if I may, Madam Chair,
Please.
you dropped out. Did you answer me,
Yes,
Madam Chair?
yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of coming into a conversation I may not belong in. Mr. Davis, when you say that when you click on the links and they're not chronologically in order, is that one part of the website? Is there like, is that the minutes? Is it the links
Yeah,
to the meeting?
yeah, it looks like when I click on it, it looks like the minutes, the minutes, the minutes to the previous meeting, and then like some of the videos. Like I can't show you like in this setting, but I mean I can show to you in an offline setting if that's like an easy fix or correction. Um,
Is that what you're talking about though, in terms of user friendly, that things may
Yes.
not be in order?
yes.
Okay.
Anything else that you noticed there on the website, Mr. Davis, that you want to bring forward?
If it's new business, you cannot deliberate and vote on it at this meeting. It has to be on the
Right.
agenda for next time.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying to get out on the table. Was there other issues with the website that we need to put for next month's?
Well, can I just make a motion just to have a deliberation and discussion of the website for next month's meeting? And so then that way I can have time, just because again, I wasn't prepared to have a deliberation in this setting tonight, but just that's what I wanted to talk about next time we get together.
I think Ms. Pittenger is correct that it would not be a motion tonight,
Right.
but it has been brought to the executive director's attention so that she will put it on the agenda for discussion next month.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Sure thing.
Other new business.
And the other piece I would like to, Mr. Ward, if you could help me out. I wanted to schedule an executive session in regards to employment with the CPRB.
The Pennsylvania Sunshine Act was amended, but I don't think it disturbed the issues with respect to executive session other than requiring minutes. There are certain statutory exceptions that allow board members not to conduct business openly, but instead have a closed meeting, which we call executive session. There are statutorily listed exceptions, such as whether it pertains to a collective bargaining agreement or the purchase of or lease of real property, discussion of pending litigation. But to pick up on what Mr. Davis, I think, is asking is whether the board member wishes to discuss personnel matters would be something that would be subject to executive session. And not
Correct.
Mr. Ward, could you give me a little guidance on my responsibility to that? Do I enforce it? Do I make the decision whether we go into executive session?
Well, I think if a board member wants to discuss personnel matters, it's then up to the board chairman to set aside time as to when it should go into executive session, whether it would be tonight, March 26th at the next meeting, or a separate session in between. But if it's in, regardless of when, you know, you would have to have minutes as well.
Right? Thank you. I will, can we put that I would give the, date for, under new business next meeting?
Chair, I'm going to ask to be recognized and ask Mr. Ward a question.
Mhm.
Under sunshine, one of the 4 exceptions for an executive session, Mr. Davis described it as employment with the CPRB. That I do not believe qualifies for an executive session. However, a particular personnel matter related to a particular employee would be protected and appropriate for an executive session. I think that's the personnel matter versus the issue of employment with the CPRB. Because the employment with the CPRB is just that's
employee.
not any that's personnel related, and it's not protected information. Now that's an open book. But if it involves a particular personnel matter, then I believe that is protected under the or is permissible to be discussed in an executive session.
I agree.
It would be, for clarification, it would be for a specific person that would constitute the reasoning for going into executive session. And that would have sensitive information discussed in the nature of the discussion.
So for further clarification, would that discussion pertain to an existing employee of the CPRB?
Correct.
Okay. Not a future hire or something like that.
Correct.
Okay.
I would ask that if Mr. Davis has information that has something to do with the current employee that I'm responsible for, that should be brought to the attention of our solicitor and our chairperson with haste.
Okay, well, I need clarification, Mr. Ward. You made a statement there about a future employee. So is that permissible or not? Because when you put that last little caveat there, I got a little confused.
Now, I was trying to narrow Mr. Davis's request to confirm that it pertains to an existing employee as opposed to, for example, a future hire. If it does pertain to an existing employee, as Ms. Pitcher pointed out, that's a discussion of existing personnel matters, which is subject to executive session under Section 708 of the Sunshine Act.
And I was making my clarification that it does pertain to an existing employee.
And I think there's more clarification because I think it's more about a future employee.
That's not what I'm hearing, Dr. Gershio. I'm hearing Mr. Davis say that he wants the board to meet in executive session to discuss an existing employee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And
I mean,
frankly, more clarification than that is not appropriate because that's something that pertains to precisely why executive session was created, to discuss a sensitive personnel matter in a closed meeting as opposed to on a Zoom or YouTube call.
okay. So I would have to set a schedule for executive committee. So is it appropriate that I at this point say that I will have that date on our next meeting, at our next meeting?
I think Beth was saying, without having the details, that there probably some expedience that needs to be to this matter. So we probably need to figure out a date prior to our next meeting. If you, I think there's we need to move this a little quicker. So you can call for us, Mr. Ward, you can clarify, but I think you can call for a date. I mean, and we can find out, are we allowed to send out to see what's the best date for us to have, and then call that date that everybody can come to that meeting, because we don't know what everybody's schedule is prior to the next meeting if we need to do it beforehand.
Sounds reasonable. It's just a scheduling matter.
Yep.
Right, so I will put an email out with some dates, and then we could respond, and if people could quickly respond, I would greatly appreciate it. Everybody okay with the Zoom, or does this need to be in person? Because that's a scheduling thing, so I just want to get clarity. Anybody's preference?
I don't know that it needs to be in person, but I was waiting for Mr. Davis to drive that.
Mr. Davis?
Yes, sorry, you cut in and out for,
Sorry, are you okay with a virtual meeting?
I am fine with that.
Okay, so within the next day or so, please check your email. I'll throw some dates and times out there. If everybody can respond, we'll do it, as we'll quickly do this.
Okay.
There's one residual issue that Ms. Pittenger raised, and as a courtesy, it might make sense for Mr. Davis to inform Dr. Gershio of the nature of the discussion in it, just so she has an understanding as to whether any kind of legal advice is necessary. I don't need to receive that at this point. I don't need to participate in executive session. Executive session would be a closed meeting of the board members only. But I think as a courtesy to the board, it would be helpful if Mr. Davis provided Dr. Gershio with that information. So at least we know what the topic is. Not we, I mean, at least the board would know what the topic is to be prepared.
And Mr. Ward, and please, for point of clarity, is it in our ability, if we so wish, to have you at that meeting, just in case we come up with a legal question as far as in the deliberations, just for your guidance? If it's the pleasure of the chair?
I could be available, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to participate. It's sort of like in a jury trial, once the jury goes into deliberation, they would love to have the judge present, but it's not appropriate. So
Gotcha.
I would make myself available for a call or to jump on your Zoom if a legal question emerged.
Thank you.
Well, I'll put you on the email so that you're aware of dates, okay? And if there's one that you just can't, do, just let us know.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Righty, do I keep breaking in and out?
You're fine.
Okay. Alrighty, any other new business? Mr. Davis, you said 2 points, right? And we got them both.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, case review. Give a second here to pull them up, and we'll go through case review in about 20 seconds. All righty. So, I have to move on all of you nice people into another corner so I can see the numbers. All righty. So we have, hold on. For a full investigation case, we have one, and that is case number 012-4. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We have one case number 191-23 for a 30-day extension of a full investigation. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, we have 3 for unfounded. And they are case number 194-23, 138-23, 085-23.
I'll make the motion.
That's- All right, I think that was it, right? Stephanie, can you go up? I think it was only 3,
Yes,
right?
that
All right.
was it.
All right. Oh, I have a motion on the floor. Second,
Second.
thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Now we have 2 that are unsustainable. That's case number 131-23 and case number 028-3. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 You. Ayes have it. We have 5 that are considered other, and they are case number 147-23, case 113-23, case 055-23, and excuse me, case 052-23, and the final one is case 112-20. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. And then Beth went over a couple of we have one suspension, I'm sorry. Case number 109-23. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And again, in discussion with Beth, instead of going through all the others that we had, she was just going to bring up the ones that were of importance. Does anybody have any question about the 22? Because I'd like to do them all in one, unless there is something that someone needs to talk about.
Dr. Gershow, you typically haven't required a vote on these cases. That's just for informational purposes.
Right. So, okay, I'm sorry. So does anybody have any discussion about the 22 out there? I know that Beth addressed 2 of them today. Does anybody else need anything else addressed? Hearing none. Next agenda item is that our meeting, public comment. Do we have, Steph, is anybody, I'm gonna check the chat here. I think, see if we have anything in the chat. Do you have
I don't
anything?
see, I don't see anything.
Okay. Give another half minute, see if anybody wants to put anything in the chat. Or just.
Miss Shields? Miss Shields?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Tokarski got back to me and he said to just come to the class and he will email you what info he needs.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's great news. Hearing none. Our next meeting is April, and I'm looking on my calendar, so give me a minute here.
March.
March, I'm sorry. Is it March 26th?
Is that a meeting you want to have at the city council chambers?
What's your pleasure, team?
I will not be able to be in person on the 26th. I could attend virtually, but I would not be able to attend in person.
I won't be able to attend in person either. I'm traveling the next day, so.
So let's look at another date. Let's make the 26th virtual. It's 6 p.m. Thank you.
Ozark said hello and they thanked us for our service.
Tell them thank you for their continued support of the Police Review Board. Do I have a motion at 7:24 p.m. to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor?
Aye.
I should have had discussion, but opposed? Ayes have it. See everyone.